Welcome to Roadmap, Auto Trader UK's product and tech podcast. And jingles aside, today I'm joined by the one and only Dave White. There is only one Dave White, isn't there, Dave? Or did there used to be two Dave Whites?
I think there was at a time 3 or 4, but only one spelt off a Y though.
Yeah. So I remember that when I first joined, they said go and see Dave White, and I went, and saw the wrong Dave White. Talked at him for about 15 minutes, and then he went, "You want the guy over there?" So, Dave, you've worked. I've been here 12 years. We were just chatting before, which seems like a lifetime. Like you've been here even longer. So, how long have you been here at Auto Trader now?
20 years in November.
20 years.
So a long time in one company.
Long time. So it was interesting because we were just chatting before because we used to. I'm not going to say knockabout because it sounds like it's like school, but obviously back in Newton Willows days, you were like one of my major go-tos. Like first week is get introduced to Dave. Obviously the wrong Dave, then the right Dave. But what we haven't really talked about is life before Auto Trader and how you got into Auto Trader and how you got into ops. So like pre-30s, like when you're in your 20s, late teens. So what was Dave like then, and were you always looking to get into operations like it was a burning passion?
So, nutshell, no.
No.
My early career
couldn't
be so completely different from what I do now. My family's got a forces background. So my dad was in the army. Moved around from place to place when I was a kid. And then eventually went to boarding school in Scotland. So it was a military boarding school in Dunblane called Queen Victoria School.
Right.
And from starting that school, was destined that I was going to be in the army.
Right.
So from 15 and a half, I'd signed up on the dotted line and joined the army when I was 16. So a boy soldier. And I stayed in the army for 11 years. So travelled the world, had a really great experience in the army. And then for various reasons, decided it was time to come out.
Yeah.
And when you do leave the army, it's quite daunting on what you're going to do when you leave. I did have a trade in the army, but didn't really want to do that in.
So what was your trade in the army then?
Main trade was a carpenter and joiner, but I'm probably the worst carpenter and joiner you've ever met. So I didn't really enjoy doing it at all. So I wanted a complete career change.
Right.
And at the time, there was early 2000s, so there's a bit of an IT boom.
Yeah.
Especially around the year 2000 doom that was predicted.
I was on support for that for Y2K, and honestly, it was people talked about it. I thought the world was going to end. I thought everything was going to end.
That was it, and then it was a bit of nothing really happened. But at the time, so when I left school, I didn't actually have any qualifications. I knew I was going to join the army, so I didn't do that great at school. For what I did in the army, that was perfectly fine. But when I came out then, it was like, what do I want to do? And I was fairly interested, I thought, in computers. Yeah. So I did like a 6-week resettlement course in computers. And
so is that something like the army lined up for you?
Yeah, they pay for it.
Yeah.
And they help you. Most of the time they help you do it. But if you're wearing tour and stuff, then you can't do it. But they try to give you space. And they pay for some training to help you resettle into civilian life, which is really good. And I was really grateful for that. And the benefit of doing this 6-week course is they guarantee a job at the end of it. So that's always a good thing because it is you don't know what you are going to do. And in the army, you're quite institutionalized. So when you come out, it's a little bit, everything's completely different.
Yeah.
So I did a 6-week course, and I thought at that point I knew everything about computers.
Were you on like a Specky 48K, or what kind of computers were you on?
No, it was PC. It was like like Windows NT.
Yeah.
Mainly the qualification was around Windows, like Windows servers and stuff. But I thought I knew quite a lot about computers, and the job I got at the end of that was, at the time, people bought their home PCs through 2 companies. One was Time and one was Tiny.
Oh my God. Time the one that over in Blackburn or something like that. I'm sure there was.
They had quite a few stores.
Yeah.
Until we didn't. But they were the two companies. Yeah. So I got a job with a subcontractor for Tiny, going to people's houses and fixing their PCs, which was quite a weird experience.
I mean, that's one of those jobs. Like one of my mates is a plumber, and it is the going into people's houses. He said it's like it's daunting because you don't know what you're going into sometimes, and it's like, and they expect you to know absolutely everything, and sometimes you're like, I've got no idea what's going on.
I think so. I think the worst thing was as soon as you come through a door, you get grilled because say they've had a poor experience, Tiny.
Yeah.
They're like blah blah blah, and you had to say to them, look, I don't actually work for Tiny, and whatever they've done,
And I don't actually know anything about computers.
I'm here to fix your computer. That's what I'm trying to do.
So is there a big on-off button? Was it? Is that what?
Most of the time, actually, it was you had a system restore disk, and a lot of the time, a lot of the faults were more software can just be fixed by restoring. That was the sort of policy at the time. But annoyingly as well with Tiny, they didn't give you a lot of spare parts. So even though you knew you were going to a job and you knew that absolutely it's an issue with, say, the CPU, they wouldn't give you that part. You had to like go 2 or 3 times before eventually they might say, oh, try this first or try that first.
Yeah.
So it's really annoying because you were going to fix a job but you knew they didn't have what you needed to fix it. But it wasn't eye-opener, especially I think just seeing different people.
Yeah, yeah.
And because you're going from house to house, you might use their toilets, and it's lit, but you can tell by, oh my God, there was some sights you see. So I think, unfortunately, but I think really fortunately, the company I worked with lost the contract. So they only then start to employ Tiny engineers, and I went for the interview for that.
Right.
I didn't get the job, which was like frustrating, but actually then it led on to other things.
So it was one of those blessing in disguise.
It really was.
So is that so when you left the company and then get Tiny? Is that when you like arrived at TMG or whatever it was at the time, Art Trader?
No, so at that time, I went back to. Luckily, the training that I did, the course that I did, because I not long left, I went back to them, and they helped me get a job. And so I was living in Ripon at the time.
Oh yeah,
and I
nice.
got a job in Leeds, and it was with a business ISP called Energis at the time, and they were actually the hosting company for FreeServe, which was a big customer ISP at the time, a little bit like the versions of today.
Yeah.
It was FreeServe was big, and they also were the had Dixon's, Curry, so quite a lot of big companies with them. So I went for an interview for that job, and they recruited loads of people, and that was for like a 24/7 tech support role.
Yeah.
So I thought I knew about computers, and I realised when I got to this ISP that I didn't know nothing.
So is that like office based then, or you weren't working at home? That was all
totally office based,
right.
And it was weird shifts, but essentially it was a 24/7 on site support, and they then supported you from training. So that's when I started to learn about Unix, so not just Windows, because most servers that are there were more like Linux, Unix. So it was a really good hands-on, and I think it was good because there was a lot of us in the same, just joined at the same time. So there was loads of courses for us, very supportive, and I really enjoyed working there. It was a really good time.
So that sound like, I mean, it just like in my head. So straight out of school into the army, N number of years in the army, then you're working in people's houses, random bathroom experiences, then you end up in sort of a much more structured, ITIL based environment. So was that your gate, sort of the door open for Auto Trader? Because obviously I've known you always here.
So I would have stayed there, but my family, we moved from Ripon to staying in Wigan, and then I had to travel across the M62.
Oh, awful.
Yeah. So after about a year of that, I was like, if I keep doing this, I'm not going to survive.
Yeah.
Because especially, it was long shifts, so 12-hour shifts on the motorway, and if I was in handover, I'd leave around like 7:10, and it was just gridlock.
Yeah.
And I was falling asleep on the car, trying to drive home. Like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So then I started looking for jobs, essentially near Wigan, and I think the second job that I went for was Auto Trader.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because it is. I mean, like I was telling someone about this today. Why did you end up at Auto Trader? It was similar to you. It was working away, but the commute was up to Scotland, so I was staying over. But it was more the family looking in the northwest for like technology-based companies, and I knew a few people here, and it just came up a few times on the radar. And then didn't really know a lot about it, and then find yourself here and you're like, oof. And then you find yourself rolling like yourself 20 years forward and you're still here. So just before I go on to like, so I found it interesting when you talked about the armed forces, because at my old place there was a lot of ex-armed forces working with BA Systems and other. There is like a little bit of a armed forces community in AT, isn't there? Because there's a few people I talked to who've been in the army or the RAF.
Yeah, so there is a few people in forces that do work in Auto Trader. I think what you're saying is right. I think if you go into IT, there is some bigger companies like Fujitsu, etc., which do take a lot of forces. But in Auto Trader, there is a few from armed forces, and we got a not a massive community, but I'll create a Slack group, and we had like coffee chats. Yeah. So I'm long overdue arranging a new one, but it's quite interesting because I think when you leave the army, it's a massive culture shock.
Yeah.
And things that you would talk about or how you talk, etc., is just completely different. Yeah. And it takes a while to sort of like fit in. So when you speaking to some people that are ex-army, it's no matter what they are, who they are, where they served, when they served, it just clicks straight away, and you have a really good conversation because there's so many things you remember about the hardships or the food you ate or where you were and what it's like that the average person just can't comprehend. So you speak to people that have been there and seen it. It's really good. So try and do more of that in Auto Trader because I think it's good to do stuff like that.
Yeah. No, it is interesting because it's one of the lads I did a degree man with, and everyone was explaining the background, and he said like he was a sniper. Yeah. And it was the one where you could see like the whole room went like silent because everyone like there's a lot of similar backgrounds, and then it was one, and then I was speaking to one of your colleagues, Lee, and I know Lee was in the armed force, so it is one where you don't think about it, but then when you come across a number of people, it is interesting. Like it's another like sub community within AT where
you automatically feel a connection with that person as well, and then. There's also an element of people that might have been done something but haven't done anything. You can tell when you speak to someone that, oh yeah, they know what we're talking about, and straight away it clicks, and you have some really good. It's funny because you can tell stories, and the other person's got very similar stories to you, and it's just a really good conversation.
Yeah, it's the shared lived experience, isn't it? It is. So then landing in Auto Trader, so what was it, 2004?
Yeah.
So November 2004. So. I came, I think, August 2012. So, and it seemed pretty well-oiled machine. I mean, the difference between then and now is like ridiculous. So, what was it like when you landed in 2004?
So, I think I describe it as a bit chaotic, but it was a completely different experience to what we're going to discuss is from now back then. When I first joined, it was all about the magazine.
Yeah.
So the induction for you wasn't about tech. It was we went to the Apple print press and got shown the magazine from start to finish and told in certain terms, your main job here is to support the magazine.
Yeah.
If it goes wrong or doesn't get published, then which never happened, then it's not a good thing to have, not a good place to be in. So that was it. So we were essentially. IT was split. There was more like a support section that were down south, and we were supporting the website. I still think at the time when I first joined, it was still felt a little bit like these people are building this site, but it's not really going to come to anything, and it's like just a thing we're doing. But actually, hindsight, we were well ahead of the curve, and this was going to be the future, was the website.
Yeah. So was there no technology involved at all, like with the mag, like imagery, or was that totally separate? Was it all? No,
we had to support some of that, and some of the apps that we had. It was essentially the smooth running of the magazine. Yeah. So there was some of those at the time were the core apps. These had to be anything wrong with that, we'd all over it and fix it.
That's the kind of 24/7 support for.
Yeah, overall it was 24/7. It was the still support on the main website. But also at the time when I first joined, we had presence in South Africa, presence in Holland.
Yeah.
So we had their websites and their search, and that was quite a complicated setup.
And in the UK support, was it UK support?
So we supported that in UK. So there was difficulties with that, as in obviously time zone difference and cultural difference as well, where it was quite hard to support. But ultimately, though, it was hard work. So there was we also I worked in what they called a NOC at the time, so Network Operations Center, and we were in like this small room which is called a goldfish bowl. So it was a room that's surrounded by like glass, so people could peer in and see these goldfish network ops in there.
How many was there of you?
So I think it was about 7 or 8, but we covered like 3 different shifts. So it was a covering effectively from 6 in the morning until 10:30 at night.
Yeah.
And then we introduced a weekend cover as well. But a thing I do remember about them was when things went wrong, they really went wrong.
Yeah.
And due to how the system was set up and technology we were using at the time, when something broke, you were talking about hours and hours and hours of
So if it's
downtime.
like a Saturday morning or whatever, that is the weekend or the day completely wiped out.
So, and as a family man as well, sometimes there was hard conversations with my wife around, is this the right job for you?
Yeah.
And we can't keep doing, because you make a plan and then Saturday you get called and you absolutely knew you wouldn't be fixed until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
And is that where you used to like have a modem in your bag you'd have to plug in at home and all that?
Yeah, back in those days. And you could organise conference calls, which was a palaver, so get people to join in. So nowhere near as slick as anything that we do now. So it was quite hard. And back in those days, it was even a simple job to restart a server, as in restart web server. You're talking about 5-10 minutes for someone to restart. It was just, everything was so slow.
Yeah. But did you think at the time, do you think, oh my God, everything is so slow? Or is it like, this is, because that's a bit like, was it a step up from where you'd been before, or was it a step back in terms of like the operational slickness?
So initially it was a step back, because where I worked before was an ISP and they had some really good monitoring tools.
Yeah.
But it was a different job. You were supporting other people, whereas this was our services.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I did pretty well quite quickly, was I was saying, why don't we do this, why don't we do that, and introducing some stuff that we used to do at the ISP. But it was quite isolated, and it was just a quite hard experience, because people weren't really in sync with what we should be doing.
Yeah.
So everyone thought they were doing the right thing, but it wasn't. And it's just the multiple incidents, not suggesting that it was everything broken all the time, but it wasn't good. And the other thing we struggled with as well was a lot of disconnects. So we'd support, as in our team's responsible for monitoring, yet when something went wrong, it was really hard to actually get ownership from developers to be investigating and fixing issues. And I think at the time as well, it was that was back in the days of some apps that get released once a year. So when something broke, so when we release something, there's multiple changes and never ever went well, but it's really hard to pick apart. And again, then it was struggle to get developers to own stuff. And I think lastly, those times there was so many Friday 4:30, something going pear-shaped, and then you knew you're going to be there at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, with a few developers that were always ones that stick by and help you, but it was just hard. And also back in those days, it was we were doing manual data tape backups, so sometimes it was restoring from really old-fashioned backups and stuff like that. So
I remember I remember some of the stuff like that. So what were the things, because there's bits where I think from like my roles, like what are the big, like not the actual milestones they're getting there, but what you can compare and say these are the big things that have changed. So like if you're looking back at your late 20s self and going, this is hard, what are the big things that you could have said, like, don't worry, in 20 years this is the kind of stuff, whether it be you don't have to be in the office on shift at 6 a.m. or whatever it would be. What were those big changes that were tangible to the role itself? So you mentioned like ownership by devs, like we don't have a glass
so now
knock.
So nowadays we cover from 7 in the morning until 5:30. That's sort of the in-office cover. In-office, obviously, there is remote working aspects to that. And out of hours, we've got a small pool engineers that would get alerts via our various monitoring tools that we've got in place.
But that's alerting, not like sitting in front of a screen watching what's going on.
A bit of both.
Yeah.
So we have absolutely got stuff covered with alerts, but in the past it's very much reactive monitoring. So it was mainly waiting for alerts to happen.
Yeah.
Now we've got a lot more visibility where we can actually see graphs and
so you can see the
trends.
trends.
Literally see things change real time.
Yeah.
So we can see if we've got an increase in error rate. So we're actually most of the operational team will be maybe looking into an issue as soon as they see the first signs of it, even before it actually starts alerting. Not just they will raise an incident, but they're already starting to think about what that might be. Or if it drops off, then right, keep an eye on that, but maybe don't need an action right now.
Yeah.
So it feels more like we're on it. But I think a big shift is because the alerting tools that we've built out, there's more ownership with devs. So when an alert occurs, we've got a sense of ownership. So if you've built an app and it's on our platform, there's a service owner and there's maintainers. So you've got listed people that are responsible for the application. And our system knows that if you're still a Naught employee, because back in the day, the nightmare was we check an old Wikidoc and it says, oh, Joe is responsible for the app. And you try and track down Joe and someone says, oh, they left 2 years ago. Well, who's responsible for this now? There's no way to keep that updated. Yeah. So our alerting system all synced in with various internal systems to know that that person's left. When we get alert telling us that person's left, so we got to update the tool. Yeah. So if an app is broken, those people are responsible. Yeah. So they get alerted when an issue occurs. So also if you release something, so developers release stuff into live, if an issue is caused soon after they've released something, they'll get a ping saying this issue, we can see maybe an elevated errors, and you've just released this app, so it's probably something related to what you've done. So we've gone from now where in the past there was an issue and a nightmare trying to track down the relevant devs, to right now actually the dev that might have inadvertently maybe caused an issue is getting pinged and they're owning the incident, sometimes without even any ops or administration involvement. So they're on it, oh yep, that was me, and then backing out at the app. So it's just it's pretty slick, which makes our job easier operationally. But yeah, so the working together is definitely a lot more working together and a lot more collective thinking on how can we improve what we do and our systems. Yeah.
And is there any big process that, I mean, we talked previously about change control boards and having 500 people in a room and discussing things that are probably not relevant to them. So in terms of that, some of the old practices, is there anything that's still, probably to pivot, is there anything still living from the early days when you joined, like any process practice, or is everything changed?
I think pretty much everything's changed, but also it's to get where we are today, it's been that journey. Yeah. So I think we're also a pretty good company that we don't keep on doing something for the sake of doing something. We might do a process or add a new system, whatever, until it runs its course. Once we feel it's run its course, then we let that go. So when I first joined, no real processes, apart from incidents being raised, but nothing really helping you think a certain way. So not long after I joined, me and a few other operations team went on ITIL courses. So ITIL is like this framework of best practices. And one of them is around incident management. So we did a foundation course. And then we felt that actually there's some really good stuff here to help us. And it's very basic stuff, really, but stuff that we just weren't doing. So when we spoke to manager at the time, we sort of agreed that everyone in operations would go and do this course. So we got some people in, trained people up, and everyone got the qualification. I don't think everyone was happy about it at the time, but once they started seeing it, and we then started talking, there's more of an in-sync discussion. Yeah. So from that, we then started thinking about alerting and monitoring in different ways. So we used to unbelievably have it that the first time we know there'd be an issue is literally when a database is dying, and it might be it's run out of disk space. So we're like, well, why haven't we got warnings in place to be alert when it gets to 80% and stuff like that we weren't even doing. So then it's maybe, right, let's do a warning 80% and critical 90%. As soon as we started to implement some of these changes, then the incidents naturally started dropping down, or at least it gave us like a more proactive warning to be fixing something or doing something about it before it actually blows up.
Yeah.
Because when a database goes down, there's all sorts of things can happen. It could be corruption, so when it comes back up, it might take it forever to come back up. So if you can stop the database going down and proactively be fixing the issue before it actually breaks, then that's what we're doing. So same as we used to heavily use filers for storage, and yeah, again, there's no like, right, it's filling up. It was just boom, right, it's blown up. And then the recovery process was just immense. So it was following, so initially it was more incident management.
Yeah.
But then as we started looking into it, we actually then implemented change management and then release management. And then we, for a period of time, had a service delivery team, so manager responsible for all these processes. And that worked for a number of years. And then we did close off that team because we felt the processes were implemented and we were running with that. And I think, to be honest, we were concerned that if we didn't get rid of that team, it was quite hard. That was back when the financial crisis ongoing around us. There was talk about redundancies and stuff like that. So we felt we got maximum benefit from that team, and we then just separated our own ways, but then sort of went into other teams, but still keep on focusing on these processes. So no big service delivery management team. It's more like let's assimilate into.
Yeah.
But those processes, I think, helped us start thinking about things the right way. Thinking about.
So I think that's when. So I think it was at that point, probably when it was the release management, is when 2012 when I joined, and then it feels like the cycle of change then seemed more rapid. Like as in, it felt like even in the move from Newton to here, and that was within 2 years, things were very different and are very different again.
So those were initial processes. I think a couple of other changes which really helped was, I think it's quite good at Orchard, but we have always been given quite a lot of space to actually build out internal tooling. So we started looking at how can we improve release processes? How can we make it slicker, make it easier for developers to be pushing out releases? And at the same sort of time, we also had, I'm sure you remember, like quite a lot of big internal cultural changes.
Yeah.
So it really helped then, I think, culture changes weren't a case of, oh, this is just Ops doing this. It was from the top down. So I always felt from pretty much every senior leadership manager we've had, from early days even up to now, they've always bought into what we're doing.
Yeah.
And you never had to really do any hard sales, because we effectively, most time, we are always doing the right thing. We're always trying to ask the right questions, do the right thing. So it's been quite good to have that. So I do hear stories from other companies where they're trying to do this culture thing in, like, say, DevOps teams or some teams, but because not getting the buying from up top, it's really hard to do because not everyone's buying into it. So all try to think we've done that. So I think along the way, culture changes, us implement processes when we felt they're needed, and importantly, when we feel that, we got what we need from that, it's not quite working anymore. So change process, it was really good. We start to really lift the lid on what we're doing and think about stuff. But then it got very quickly to the point of like, this is actually slowing us down. And do we need all these multiple managers into 2-hour meeting to discuss actually quite low level trivial changes? Probably not. So I think at the right time we decided, you know what, let's pause back a bit.
Yeah.
And the release process as well, when we implemented that, it was actually quite process heavy. And almost straight away, we realised this wasn't going to work. So and at the time, so it was the argument years ago, there was ITIL and then Agile came along, and it was feeling if you are really strict ITIL, it won't work with Agile. So I think we were quite practical, as in the service delivery team at the time. It was, this thing's come along, how do we make it work? What we've got to do, right, let's actually reduce what we're doing on the ITIL side and then make this work. I think that really helped. Again, I see other companies where actually still are sticklers on, no, it's got to be this ITIL process and you've got to have this approval and this and this. We've reduced quite a lot of that, which meant over the years, changes we want to make have been easier to do, and it's just been iterations until we sort of get to where we are now.
Yeah. And the two things when we were chatting beforehand, two of the things that like you were looking back fondly when we talked about the cloud migration and like the approach to that, and also like the closing the data centers. And I remember visiting the data centers, and in my old job I spent a lot of time in data centers. So those two felt like two things that I know they're past and it's looking back, but ones that you definitely feel like those were big major achievements.
So I was thinking about this the other day. I think the first one we did is actually we tried to attempt our own private cloud, and we built that out, and it didn't quite work out for us. But I think it was good because we gained quite a lot of experience from that, and thinking how our apps are working to make apps more cloud friendly. But we realised very quickly that it's going to be nightmare support. So the pains in the past is very much supporting a data center is hard work, and we had 2 data centers. So it's all the infrastructure and servers need to be updated, upgraded. Back in the day as well, we did a lot of that out of hours, and a lot of that required downtime, planning, sorting it all out. It was just really hard work. So I think, we did a lot of good work on an internal private cloud, but it was clear that wasn't the future for us. And then through us investigating public cloud, because we had a few requirements we had to try to meet regarding security and a few other bits, and we wanted to improve our flow, so more releases, get more change out there. We knew what we had now wasn't working, or wouldn't give us what we wanted in a long term. So we had a few people that were recruited, had experience building out cloud environments, so that was invaluable for us. And then we set a target we want to move into public cloud. So we chose GCP, utilizing Kubernetes and Istio. But what really liked was we had the buy-in from word go on this is the right thing to do. And also, I think we took the right approach. So we didn't just do a lift and shift. It wasn't like, let's move everything quickly. We really wanted to get as much benefit from this as possible. So we built out the initial infrastructure, including the monitoring. So you get default monitoring when an app goes into cloud. But then it was a slow migration. Took a lot longer than we anticipated. But we put a few lines of sand. We wanted to migrate everything. And not a lot of companies out there actually, when talking about cloud migration, actually migrate everything. So they don't actually get true benefit because they're still having to support, maintain data centers. The app's still got to talk about data. We were like, no, it's got to be a full migration. And that's what we set out to achieve. But it's very sort of slow time. So, but the amount of information we got was amazing. So it might be we would 1 week migrate one app to the cloud. And this app might say have 10 servers that we needed to support this application. Move it to the cloud, and with the extra visibility we got, we'd see patterns that we couldn't see before. So it might mean that, say, a key app during peak time for us, which is around 8 p.m., we notice that a third party is hitting us very heavily for an hour. It's like, why are we doing that? So contact a third party, get them to shift that to a different time. Also, we had, which is a classic Ops Eng, is the logs were just full of rubbish and lots of errors. So it's a nightmare for an ops person if you go try and investigate, or a dev person, investigate an issue, and it's like, I can see this error, well, that goes back like years, or this error, that goes back months. It's like, great. So
can't see the wood for the trees.
You were adamant that, right, cut that out. Let's put right status codes in.
Yeah.
What is this issue with these errors? Let's fix it. So the end result was a clean app with clean errors, clean status codes, and we actually found we reduced then the service. So this app, because we're completely masking it each time by just throwing more servers at it, we go from 10 servers down to, say, equivalent or say 2 or 3 servers. And that was like, wow. So I think the belief is when you go to public cloud migration, it's like, a lot more expensive, low services, but actually overall initially we're reducing it because we're making everything more effective. So that was a game changer. But also remember what I found personally quite hard was if you'd be doing something a certain way for ages, like monitoring things and using certain tools, and we were very reactive. When we were then talking about migration, it was like operationally our roles completely changed. As in the way we think about things and look at things. And it took me a little bit to get my head around that, but a lot of the engineers are still with us today. And I remember one of the engineers keep telling me, look, Dave, honestly, it'll be fine. This is division. Just trust me, it'll be fine. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, okay. But absolutely, I couldn't dream going back to where we used to do things. What we do now is just, it's pretty awesome, really is awesome.
So do you feel like, I know this is a hard question, but like, are we at, if there was a pinnacle, is there a pinnacle, or is the pinnacle always just out of reach? Like, is there more to, what more is there to do? Or is it a case of like, this is as good as it gets?
So I think in this space, it's never ever reach the what you're trying to get to. I think we massively improve what we're doing. Things are a lot easier visibility wise, but you're always trying to improve. Yeah. So the one thing noticeably, and it is be quite open with it, is that we have reduced. So we treat the platform as a service, but overall we've reduced the people supporting that over the years because we've got rid of 2 data centers. So traditional engineers, we had reduced size-wise. Yeah. So we've got a core set of platform engineers. But AutoTrader, the engineers we've got are awesome. So it's every engineer is continually questioning what we're doing now. It's tweaking that, making it more efficient, more better. Recently, we've just done a piece of work and still nearly completing it off, is database automation. So making it so that in the past, a developer, if they want to create an app, you can create an app now easily, but used to be had to reach out to a database engineer to create a database, set stuff up, do password management, stuff like that. We want to make it that, no, as a developer, you can literally, you want my app, put some details, I want a database, you can easily do it in code to create your database and change your database and make us deploying like fixes or updates really easy with minimal impact to the app itself. So we're always thinking about, right, how we're doing this. Even some stuff we might have done in time, it's achieved a goal, but actually it's now no longer relevant. How do we update?
It's a bit like you were saying when you're talking about like the change control or service management. It's just that continuous evolution. I do find it fascinating because sometimes I sit on the bank next to you guys and just overhearing the conversation that going on in comparison to other conversations. So it is fascinating stuff. But unfortunately, we are coming out of time. I mean, I still wouldn't mind going back to what your experiences in people's houses, because that is one of my favourite stories when I chat to my mate at the weekend.
It's
like,
definitely some of my openers.
What craziness has happened this week. But honestly, that was great. And cheers for a little bit of a trip down memory lane, because it does feel like they were good times back in Newton. So, cheers listeners for listening and viewing, and tune in to yet another episode. And remember to like and subscribe on YouTube, hit the notification button so you never miss an episode, and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And that is us done. Cheers, Dave.
Thanks, Pete.